Abortion happens every day. Millions of people around the world will have an abortion each year. But the majority of those people will never talk about their abortion experiences. What if millions of people broke their silence and told the truth about their lives and their choices? This is Melissa Madera in Boston, Massachusetts, and you're listening to the Abortion Diary podcast. These are the stories we share.
When I was writing my book, I think that one reason I wrote this book is because it gave me a place to share my story without anybody cutting me off or being uncomfortable. The page was always there to receive my story, and so I'm like already gonna cry. I didn't even think I was gonna cry, but yeah, the page was always there to listen to my story, and for like 13 years, and that's really how long I needed to tell it without being interrupted. And when I gave my book away to the publisher for the last time, I felt so much grief over letting go of the story. And of course, everybody was saying, "But your baby," making all those comparisons, which women writers have always made comparisons between birth and publication. And I actually love that. And it was also because it was a friend to me, just a listener. The page was just such a good listener for all that time. And I really couldn't write about anything else for like 13 years. When I tried to write about other things, it wasn't coming from the heart, really. It was coming from, I should write about something else. I don't want to get pigeonholed into being an abortion writer, especially writing in a space that doesn't really exist, which is the space of not playing into the political debate, the space of talking honestly and authentically about emotions, and thoughts and curiosities and fascinations with that experience of being pregnant, not bringing the pregnancy to term, but still wanting to talk about that I had been pregnant, I had this pregnancy, and that not being politicized. And the page did not politicize me. It didn't. I didn't feel judged by it. Sometimes I was frustrated by it, but it was only because of the reflection of myself. So when you said that I could talk as long as I want, it's like, oh my God, I've actually never had, and I've been doing this for a really long time, talking about my abortion in public and sharing stories and writing and publishing about it. And I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that before, even in settings that are specifically for abortion. Well, especially not in settings that are specifically for abortion. So yeah, I mean, that could also, so one thing I've learned in these couple of years, or these couple of many 13 years, has been that, and it's not a full 13 years, I had my abortion on April 27th, 2004. And the weird thing about that was that I mixed up the date for a long time. Until 2012, I thought my abortion happened on April 26th. And then I went to this retreat I took myself on a solo silent retreat in the woods of Vermont, which I write about in the book, but I didn't include this part. And I had gone there because I intended to go back to the clinic on the 8th anniversary of my abortion. I just wanted to see what it was. It was almost like a test. Like, I've done all this healing. Can I go back and be in that space again? And not because he was even particularly dramatic or traumatic in there. It was actually really or anticlimactic. It was just super anticlimactic. But I just had mythologized it so much in my head, going back out into this world that talks about it in such a different way, a different story had been written into my head about what happened. But I also don't want to minimize the deeper questions I was asking about this experience once I was over on the other side. And so when I was at the silent retreat, something just told me that, like, I meditated for like 3 days, didn't talk to anybody. I was in a cabin alone in the woods at a Buddhist center, like in a tiny, tiny cabin. And something in me just said, like, the anniversary is not on the 26th, it's on the 27th. And I had this like war within. I was like, what do you mean it's not on the 26th? Like, it's like I had planned this whole trip out. I'm supposed to go back on Thursday. And it was like, you're going back on Friday. I had a rental car and everything. So I just took the chance. I was like, well, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to go on like the day after because I only have this one shot. Like, I set it all up. Like, I'm supposed to go on the 8th anniversary. Eight is like the, it means completion. It's like the number of completion. Like, I have to go back on the 8th anniversary. So I just decided to listen to that voice within, which is really what a lot of my journey has been about, is learning how to listen to that voice, trust it, and then not to either, I can doubt and question it, but only because that too sharpens my belief in it. So I took the chance and I went on Friday, which is the 27th, back to the clinic. And I walked in and I said, I think today is the 8th anniversary of my abortion. And they looked it up and they were like, wow, yeah, it is. So it was right. Something in me knew that I had the wrong date remembered. I don't know why I did that. But so I can trust that voice. But I was saying something before about listening and having a space to talk about it freely. Oh yeah, something I've learned that's been a big takeaway for me has been that a lot of my feelings around my abortion originated in another time in my life, an earlier time in my life, and that because abortion intersects with so many different experiences, like, do people want to hear what I have to say? Do people want to listen to me? Am I allowed to talk about this? What do I think about myself as a woman? What do I think about the fact that I've had sex, and that if I say I've had an abortion, people know that I've had sex. I had sex with somebody that I didn't want to or wasn't ready to be a parent with, or whatever they're going to assume about me, or wasn't ready to be. I know other people have different experiences, and that's not the only reason people would have an abortion, but there are just so many implications, and those go back so far into my youth. And these ideas, like, I dressed up as a bride for Halloween when I was like, 6 years old or something like that, like a bride. Like, what do you want to, like, what are you going to try? Like, it was a costume. Like, it was a thing that you become, like, a bride. And then I would have, like, baby dolls when I was younger. And I grew up in Kentucky. And I came up with these ideas that I was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom and a wife. And I actually think that I've come full circle to just really honoring that work, because it's so, just because it's so meaningful. Part of my like feminist trajectory that happened after abortion was really like demeaning that work and not understanding how crucial it is to be a person who creates a home. But for me, I needed to be able to have more expansive options for my life, and I wasn't allowing myself that full. I think I had to have this experience of having an abortion to open up the possibility of a different kind of life for myself, to explore other options. And I'm not a mom, and I am a wife, but I'm not definitely not making the home. I think my husband does more work around the house than I do, at least more visible work. Women do the invisible work. But that was really my ambition. when I was younger, I wanted to be a wife, a mother, and then when I was 6 years old, I won this award for writing for this whole state of Kentucky. There were like 7,000 entries for this. Like we all wrote little books, and mine was about a ghost. It was called A Ghost Named Willie, and it won like all the first graders voted it, and so people were calling me a writer when I was 6. And so I had these 3 little things, like wife, mother, writer, that I wanted to become. And I kept that in my head for like throughout my childhood and then teen years. I drank a lot when I was a teenager. And I loved to drink. It made me feel so much better. I had like really low self-esteem and but I don't think a lot of people knew that I had low self-esteem because I was, you know, I had a lot of friends. I was always at the parties, you know, it wasn't like I wasn't invited places, you know, there wasn't like an outward reason for me to have low self-esteem. I just didn't feel like I was enough. And I didn't feel, so I thought I had to add on. I was always comparing myself to other people, and I felt really like I was always going to make a mistake. I had to be perfect. And then I was so not perfect that I was like, oh my God, there's no point. And so I when I found alcohol, which is like, that's how somebody who has a bad relationship with alcohol talks about alcohol, is to say when I found alcohol. When I found alcohol, it was so amazing. It was like miraculous. So there were hearts like bursting out of my head after I took the first drink. But my commitment to being quote unquote marriageable was so strong. And I thought that being marriageable meant being virginal. So that I did not have sex that can get you pregnant. Through high school. And but I had a lot of boyfriends, dated people, cheated on people, because I would get drunk and then I would cheat because I was not enough, so I had to get more and more of everything else to add on to myself. I just like really wanted to feel loved. I think that was part of why I loved children so much, because I felt so good about myself. When I babysat for everybody, all the neighborhood kids, the kids would tell their parents I was like their best friend. And it just made me feel really good. I didn't make good grades in school for my first couple of years in high school and in middle school. And it was just like kids really made me feel, I like loved being with them. I loved playing. I felt like it just like brought out the best in me to be with children. More so than like when I would, you know, conspicuously fold clothes in front of boys so that they would think I'd be a good wife or something like that. Just being with kids, I felt really like I would forget myself. And so running through my head throughout childhood was this story, or this idea of like when I have a daughter, and like I always wanted to like save things for my future daughter. I'd be like, okay, these pants don't fit me, but they're so cool, and they're such like a sign of the times of this like 1999 that I have to save this pair of pants so that she can see what like pants looks like, because I was really into vintage clothes myself. I was like, one day these will be vintage. Like weird stuff. This is really weird. I don't even know if I should share this, but I was like, this cheeseburger wrapper is gonna, one day this will be like really weird looking. It'll be like an old timey cheeseburger wrapper, like from McDonald's. So I'm gonna save this old timey cheeseburger wrapper, like future old timey cheeseburger wrapper. I don't have a cheeseburger wrapper anymore, but I remember I was always thinking like, what will be cool to show my daughter in the future. And I had like a running list of like names for children. I would like at night I'd like come up with names. So in a lot of ways it was almost, I mean, now my belief is that what we think about will come to fruition as long as we feel like it's already ours. And I really felt like it was my destiny to become a mother and to be a mother and a writer and a wife. And maybe even in that order. Oh, I just realized that that's actually what, well, I mean, like in terms of like I got pregnant and then I became a writer and then I became a wife. But yeah, those were like my priorities. And so when I got to college, let me go back to like growing up in Kentucky. Nobody really talked about abortion. So it wasn't like I had a profound judgment about abortion. I didn't see it as a judgment. I actually thought that I just felt sad for people who'd experienced it. I thought their lives were over. I thought they were ruined. I thought, oh, those must be like, I mean, there were so many judgments about women in my head that I didn't even recognize were judgments, including like, oh, those must be the women who just these women who I can tell like they can't keep a marriage together. Like they're just, they're the ones who can't really pull it off. Like they can't pull life off. Like I had this whole story about what happens when somebody has an abortion. And they had billboards around Kentucky that were anti-abortion billboards. So we didn't talk about it, but we had these billboards, and they would have like a woman who was looking really sad on the billboard, like these huge women like on billboard, so sad with frowns on their faces. And even now there's a big billboard when I drive from around my mom's house in Kentucky, huge billboard with a baby on it, like a baby's face. And it says, God weeps for his however many million aborted children. Which I'm like, who's arrogant enough to say that they know that what God's up to? But I mean, that's also my judgment. So I didn't grow up hearing a lot. I mean, I think I heard a friend I know I had a friend in high school who was really anti-abortion. And I also, she went to a church that was like super anti-abortion. And I had another friend once tell me that we were in middle school, but it was a school where there was middle school, elementary school, and high school all together. And not in the same, there were different buildings and they were separated and everything, but it was ultimately the same school. And this woman, and my friend pointed to like an older person in high school and said, I think that she had an abortion. And I remember being like, oh my God, like, what's she gonna do? Like how is she just completely faking it right now? Like why isn't she falling apart kind of thing? So I had really deep judgments about it. Not seeing them as judgments. They were just like pity, I think, which is to me a judgment. And then I got to college in Vermont. So I decided to go to school in Vermont because I just wanted to go really far away. And I was, by the end of high school, I was like making really pretty good grades. Like I decided I wanted to become like smart. So I started making good grades and I worked really hard. And I had this like businesswoman like thing. I was like wearing like the high heels and like stomping around, drinking my coffee and like I'm staying up till like 3 a.m. working on stuff. And I just decided to be successful and decided to be like I'd watched like Aaron Brockovich, that movie, and I was like inspired to be an environmental lawyer, and which I'm not, but and I decided to go to University of Vermont because it was far away and it was one of two. I applied to 3 schools in the Northeast, and I didn't get into NYU, but I got into UVM and then Boston University. My parents said, we're not going to pay for you to go to Boston University. They said, but you can visit either BU or UVM. And I was like, well, why would I visit the school I can't go to? So I visited UVM, and it was when I walked off of when we like drove into the city, I saw the green license plates in Burlington, and I saw the mountains behind us and the lake in front of us. And it was just gorgeous. There were all these, if you walked around outside, you could hear all these like kids playing their jam band music, and there were tons of bands. Like a lot of my friends ended up being in bands. It was just fun. I mean, it was just like pure fun. It was the most fun I'd ever had in my life. It was so free. When I got to school, I just felt so free. And that part of me that's always been there, which is this, like the super free spirited side, that I felt like I had to temper or was considered weird in Kentucky. I mean, I always had like a little bit of like wildness in me, but at UVM, I could just completely be free. And my friends, a lot of my friends were not from, nobody had ever met anybody from Kentucky. They called me, Kentucky was my nickname. And they were like, we're having sex, like, or they were all having sex, so they didn't understand why I was a virgin. They thought it was kind of funny. So I had sex with someone, and I was like, okay, well, I didn't get pregnant. I mean, we would like use like 3 different methods, so I thought I was okay. And then when I was a sophomore, and everything was fine, there was just that one guy. When I was a sophomore, there's this guy who walked in the room when I was, second semester. He just like knocked on the door, and he came in. He was an old friend of my roommate's, and my roommate had known him from when she was in high school. And this guy, he was super hot. I thought he was like, he had like dark hair. He was like looking like a bad boy, and like long hair and like scruffy. And he dropped out of college, and he was really just hot. That was the main thing. And he was funny. And he was like somebody who seemed like a challenge to get him to open up, and that was attractive to me. And so I was seeing somebody else, and that was a guy that I had always just been totally in love with since I was really young. Since I was 14, I'd met him when I was 14, and we dated a little bit, and then I'd always tried to get back with him. And then when I was a freshman in college, he enlisted in the Army, and it was so shocking because he's also like a free spirit, or I always saw him as a free spirit, and I was surprised that he would go to the Army. It was like the last thing I ever expected him to do. I mean, in the world. If we had lined up every person I knew in my graduating class, he would have been the last person I would have just taken him out if they were like, who would go to the Army? Like, there's no way. Like, he wouldn't even be the last person. He just wouldn't be on the list. So it was so weird. But 9/11 had just happened, and everyone was, feeling that, just a lot of different emotions that we'd never felt before. And so when I came home that summer, we started dating, and I was so happy because it was like, I finally got him, and then he went to Korea to serve in the military. And I was in love with him, and I was drinking a lot, and this other hot dude walked in the room, and I just was like, oh, like it was like my boyfriend didn't exist, which is kind of what would happen to me before I cheated on people, is I would just push out of my head. It never happened when I was sober, but I would just push out of my head that I was dating anybody else, and just like there's a goal or something. It wasn't. So I ended up sleeping with this guy that I just met, and then we kept sleeping together. He was the second guy I ever had sex with. I hadn't even had sex with my boyfriend, and that happened over the course of a month. And it was a really wild time. Like, I was just drinking a ton. Like, time wasn't really making sense to me. I was not totally connected to school. I was having, like, we were just partying all the time. And it's really a blur. Like those first few weeks of dating him were a blur. I remember like going over to his house and drink. I remember like at one point, like I was wearing pink Chuck Taylor high tops. And I can have these like flashes of memories, like pink Chuck Taylor high tops, being in his living room playing drinking games and wearing like a gray fleece zip up and shorts for some reason. And then like drinking and like cut to like it's St. Patrick's Day and I'm wearing, I just remember what I'm wearing and everything. Because that's like the last thing, probably like looking at my shoes or something. And then I was just like, I guess I was blacking out a lot. I can never tell if I was blacking out a lot or if it was just a traumatic time. I at some point I realized that I hadn't had my period. And getting pregnant when I was 19 was like the worst fear I had, or the biggest fear I had. I wasn't on birth control, but I went I actually dragged this dude with me to go see a health person and ask for an IUD, and they said no because our relationship was too new, and they said to use condoms. And I knew in my gut, this is like one of those times where I didn't use my voice when I could have. I didn't trust my gut when I could have. I said, okay, even though I had this sinking feeling. And I just didn't have I was like, she's wearing like a professional coat, like I'm a college student. She must know better. I must be making too much of this. This is some like Bible Belt hangover thing I've got going on about needing to have 3 forms of protection. I guess I'll be okay. The next thing I know, my period didn't come, and and I told the guy I was seeing, and we spent a lot of time together. It wasn't like one of those. I mean, he was always coming over. I was always going over there. I felt like I could say anything to him. And I think we both just didn't want to face whatever it was. I remember feeling like once I know the result of the pregnancy test, then I'm going to have to do something about it, and I don't want to know. So I kept going. It was cold outside, and it was for some reason rainy. I remember it being raining, and I remember running around the track at UVM in the rain, like it was cold rain, in the dark by myself with like a Discman. It was like 2004. I had a Discman, like holding my Discman and like my big headphones, and like running around the track. And my foot, something happened to my foot. I could tell that it was like something was wrong. So my foot ended up swelling up, and I had to go to the health clinic because I couldn't even walk to class. And when I was leaving, they told me I had a foot fracture. Oh, I was getting an x-ray. And when I was getting an x-ray on my foot, they asked me if I could be pregnant. And I'd been trying to avoid that. And they said, I was like, well, my period's late. I just started like blurting things out. And I was like, oh shit. What am I gonna do? Like, I'm gonna have to find out the truth. And it was April 1st. And when I got back to the doctor's office, I asked him if I could have a pregnancy test. And it was like, it like popped out of my mouth. I had no intention of asking him. And he said yes. And this nurse took me to have, to do like a urine test. I will never forget being in that bathroom and just like trying to shut it off and just being like, no, like you're not pregnant. Like it's going to be okay. It's, you're not going to be pregnant. This is not, almost like trying to numb myself. And then the nurse came back out, and I remember looking at her and like, I remember like kind of leaning forward in the seat and wishing that she would give me like a thumbs up or something, like you're good. And she didn't even look at me. And I was in the front row. And then I remember thinking like the people around me knew what kind of test I was taking. I mean, that was impossible, but I just remember thinking, oh my God, they know. And the doctor came back out, and I kept trying to talk myself out of believing what I knew was that test had been positive. And he took me to his personal office and sat me down. I'll never forget him saying it was positive. And I was like, no. I was literally just like, no. And I was sobbing. I was like, oh my God, like, because I would like to, I waffled for the next 3 weeks, but the truth is, I think I knew the minute he told me what I was going to have to do, and I didn't want to have to do it. And I think that that's why I was reacting like that. And I was like, can I go out some back way? Can I like jump out the window? Like, how am I going to get out of here without having to walk past these people who are going to see my mascara everywhere and, in the waiting room, and they're going to know, like everybody's going to know I'm pregnant, and they're all going to think I'm this Kentucky girl, like, nobody had ever met anybody from Kentucky, and they would say things like, do y'all wear shoes? Like, sometimes, just all these, and it's like, now I'm like this pregnant girl from Kentucky, it's like already like it's just going to solidify any reputation of stupidity that I already have, because I was always worried people were going to think I was stupid. And that was another thing that came up for me, is like, people, oh my God, people always think I'm stupid, and so my boyfriend, now it's like, which boyfriend was my boyfriend? Because I had two different guys, and he was just like, he came over to pick me up in my car, and I remember just like climbing in and just like sobbing, like holding onto like his flannel shirt and just like sobbing. And he drove me to I said, will you take me to work? And I worked at this vintage shop, and I knew that my boss had an abortion, and she was the only person I'd ever heard say that she had. And so it's telling that the first person I went to see was somebody who had an abortion. I wasn't like, who has carried a pregnancy to term at age 19 in college? That wasn't my question. It was like, take me to the one person who's had an abortion that I know. And I didn't even know where you got an abortion. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I was like completely clueless. And she put me on she took me down into her office, and I was still crying. She put me on the phone with Planned Parenthood. They're like facts of Lifeline. I mean, it didn't tell me anything. It was just like, you have these 3 options. It's like, I mean, adoption, I considered, but I kind of think that is it's a false alternative. Like, it's not, it didn't feel, in that moment, it didn't feel like that was a real possibility. It didn't feel like that was a true possibility. I mean, I found information that could confirm to me for my own like sense of like, I needed to still feel like I was a good person. And I was so worried, like, what does this say about, am I a bad person if I have an abortion? And I looked up statistics about how many foster children. I couldn't believe it. I mean, there are millions of kids who have no parents across the world, millions, and that's shocking. Then there's the foster system in the United States, where kids are without parents, or who need homes. Their parents are around, but they need homes. And it just like those, even though the truth is, I think to speak to people who always want to say, well, did you consider adoption? It's really different. I mean, it just felt really different. I wanted to have the baby. It's true. Like, I think that was like, if I were going to have the baby, I would mother that child. It wasn't true for me to, that would just, the options for me were not those 3. I wanted, if I was going to have the baby, this is something I've been dreaming about since I was a little girl. And that, even when I hear myself say that, I'm like, that was really there's something about that sounds kind of selfish, or like, oh, it's about me, but that's okay. I've just found that it doesn't really serve me to be, I think it's good to identify where I've changed now, or where my ideas even about parenting have changed through this process, about what parenting is about. I used to think this is like one of the gifts, is that I used to think when I became a parent, it was really about me. Like all my dreams of becoming a parent were about me and how a child could serve me and my sense of self. And now that I have had an abortion and done this work that I've done, it's parenting doesn't seem like it's about me anymore. Like and that's actually a gift, because imagine if I had, I imagine, if I'd had this child, it would have been totally about how I could make myself look good, not about how I could allow this child to become the best and most free, fully self-expressed and authentic person that they could be. It would have been like, how can I make this child be the best expression of me? So I'm really grateful for that realization. So when I went, the 3 weeks leading up to my abortion were so painful and long and lonely. They were just so awful. I'd never felt so lonely and crazy in my life, like completely isolated and just almost like wild with like longing to connect with somebody who'd been through this and not knowing how to connect with anybody who felt the same way I did. I know there are some people who are like, well, I never wanted children. And for me, it was like, this is something I always wanted. So to have this, this was also my greatest fear, was to get pregnant. It was like so much for me. It wasn't, it had so many more complications than the other story that I had available. So it was just so painful. I remember going through the line at it was like a little grocery store on campus, and the woman who was checking me out, I remember looking at her and thinking like maybe she's had an abortion. Maybe I can ask her if she's had an abortion. And like every woman I saw, like everywhere I went, I was like thinking like, maybe she's had an abortion. Maybe she'll tell me she's had an abortion. Like every person I saw. I went to a therapist during those 3 weeks, really for the purpose of finding out whether she'd had an abortion and would talk to me about it. And I did everything except for ask her directly whether she had. I was like, all I really want is someone who's had an abortion to tell me that she's had an abortion. Do you know, know anybody? And I wanted somebody who didn't already know me, because I felt like people who already knew me had agendas for me. And I don't think they had bad agendas for me. It's not like they were trying to be, trying to like hurt me or anything. I think that they cared about me. And so, everybody wants to what's best for somebody, or what they think is best for somebody, even if it's not really in line with because the only true source of information, once I've gathered all the facts, is going to come from my gut. Because it might not even make sense to anybody else. Because I don't know my personal belief is that if we all followed our gut at exactly the same moment, we would have world peace. But it's so much of following the gut makes no sense to anybody else. And I don't know what my gut would have told me at that time. I had so much fear, just so much fear around. It was just full blown fear, and then trying to suppress my emotions for 3 weeks. I remember this girl, I was like walking up the stairs and trying to get into my dorm room, and before I burst into tears. And this girl was walking down the stairs, and she said, what's wrong, Kassi? And I was like, nothing. And she said, keep telling yourself that, maybe one day it'll be true. And I was like, I closed the door, and I was like, that bitch. I was like, who says that? It was a really bizarre moment. And so I don't even know what else to say besides it was profound loneliness. I went to church. I remember hoping, it was like some church I'd never been to, in a town that I was visiting for the first time during those 3 weeks with the guy that had impregnated me. And I remember wishing that the priest would talk to me and tell me she'd had an abortion, just like anybody. I wish that there was a support group. Like, I just wanted to be with people who'd experienced this before, because I felt like I was about to jump off a cliff and like hoping that I would learn how to fly. No, hoping that just something would catch me and like that it would like, you know, not turn out not to be a cliff. And so the guy that I was seeing, he said he wasn't ready to be a father. And I, you know, we talked a little, like at times I was, you know, I'd go back and forth a little bit in my head. And I remember telling him that, you know, what if we had a baby? What if we named the baby Jade? And then it was like, no, this is just crazy. He was developing, and I had stopped drinking. I had like completely cold turkey stopped everything, drinking, smoking, everything. And he was using still, and he was developing, he was addicted to Oxycontin, and he was developing, unbeknownst to me, a heroin addiction too. So, and things were really dark in his apartment. Someone overdosed on heroin at one point in his apartment that I found her, and her lips were purple, and he brought her back to life. I mean, this guy just like slapped her face until she came back to life. And I just was like, what is my life becoming? Like, how did I get here? I just remember thinking, like, how the hell did this happen? Like, only a year ago, or even like 6 months ago or 3 months ago, like I was drinking a lot, but my life felt like a really normal college student's life. You know, I had like the boyfriend in the army in Korea, you know, it's just like a sweet little world. And I mean, it was kind of, you know, we had really crazy nights, and yeah, there were hard drugs and stuff like that, but it was like, it felt fairly normal for a college experience. And then suddenly it was just like, I'm like pregnant and in this like heroin den watching somebody OD. I was like, what is going on? And so the day, we also didn't have money. That was the other thing. We didn't have the money for the abortion. And I didn't know how to take out a credit card. And my car broke down right before the abortion appointment. And I called my mom and was like, Mom, my car broke down. She already knew I was pregnant when I called her like the day that I found out. And she was like, what's wrong? Like as soon as I answered the phone, and my dad in the background was like, she's pregnant, isn't she? So she knew I was pregnant, and they were devastated, but my mom didn't tell me what to do. She offered, if you want to come here if you want to come home, we'll raise the child here. But she sent me a check to fix the car, and it turned out to be the exact amount of money that we needed for the abortion, minus $15, but we could come up with $15. And because I didn't have a job anymore, also my drinking, I lost my job the day I found out I was pregnant, but that wasn't because I was pregnant. It was because I was drinking, or because I was not able to and missing work and stuff. And so the check came, and I remember we're on the way to the clinic, and we had to get the check cashed because we only had one shot to borrow the car to get to the bank and then get to the clinic. And we borrowed a car. It was so embarrassing. I had to ask this girl who I didn't feel like she liked me. I mean, I've been told that she didn't like me because I had done some things that had angered her for a good reason. But I think she heard that I was pregnant, and I said, can I borrow your car? And she was like, absolutely. Because she was a feminist, and she just, like that was kind of her MO, was being a feminist. And she just like handed me her car keys, no questions asked. So we get to the bank, and the bank teller is like, you can't, my appointment's in like 45 minutes or an hour. And the bank teller is like, we can't cash this check. It's from out of state. It'll take like a few days to process. And I was just like, no, I need this money right now. And I started crying in the bank, and I just kept pushing him until he finally relented. And I got to the clinic. And there was this little book at the clinic where people would like kind of journal before their abortions, and men would write in there, about like their partners going to get their abortions, and my my boyfriend was looking at the journal, and he was like, oh my God, we were sitting there waiting for our appointment. There was nobody else in the waiting room. It was just so lonely. And he was like, he said, oh my God, these are so sad. These are so sad. He kept reading them and saying how sad they were. And I was like, I cannot talk about being sad right now. I have to just like, just don't talk to me about sadness. And went into the room, and I remember what I wore. I don't know why. I was a costume design minor, so, and I worked I've always just liked clothes, so that's why I remember what I wore. And because I picked them out intentionally, and I remember wanting the nurses not to think I was stupid. So I wore this like turtleneck sweater, because that's what you wear. Smart people wear turtleneck sweaters, like a black turtleneck sweater, and with like bell sleeves and jeans. And I remember like folding them up really nicely so that they would think I was responsible. Like I just was so afraid of all the judgment. So I like folded them up and put them on the chair. And I said I really wanted my partner in the room with me. And I didn't know actually until years afterward that apparently that's not normal to have a partner in the room. And he kept saying his stomach hurt. He got like somebody would go out there and would get him, and he'd be like, my stomach hurts, I can't come in there. And I was like, he needs to get his weenie ass in here because I'm about to have an abortion. And like, he did this to me. No, I mean, that is kind of my perspective at the time, but like, he did this to me, but it's not true. It's not true that he did that to me. We had sex and I got pregnant. And so he was in the room with me and was really supportive when he was in there. And the nurse held my hand. I had, I've heard so many people's experiences by now, and I know how supportive my setting was. Having a nurse who would hold my hand, having my partner in the room, it was in Barre, Vermont, and it was just really supportive. The whole thing, even that they had a journal out there. And it was literally, I had been told it would be like light cramping or something like that. It was the most painful experience I have ever had, like physical experience. I was like, what the hell is this? I thought at one point, that the whole thing was over. And they said we were just dilating the cervix. I was like, that wasn't it. It was so, of course it was painful. And that was part of like the experience of leading up to it, is I felt like all the information I was finding was completely insulting of the intelligence of people who go through this, because it would say things like, on one side you find all this like information that's pretty false, people who don't want people to have abortions, and then on the other side, all this information that is minimizing what the experience can be for some people. I'm sure that for some people it is like light cramping. For me, it was just like, it was horrible. And then they would say like, on the other information would be like, and you'll probably just most people just feel relieved, and you might have like some up and down emotions, and then you're good. So I just felt like all that information was just totally bogus, and I knew it at the time, and that was why it was so frustrating for me. I was like, if this is how I feel beforehand, like if I'm already like a basket case right now, then chances are I'm going to need something afterward. That's just like common sense. And after it was over, I remember walking to the clinic, and I was like, I'm never telling anybody about this. And when I left, I was like, I don't think I'm going to keep this a secret. And a week later, they sent me out the door with some birth control pills, and I didn't go back for my follow-up appointment because I didn't know how to get a car, and it was just all too much. Like, it just felt like over. I felt like if one more person asked me to do one more thing, I was gonna explode. And I was like, I can't get back here. A 45-minute drive? No. Like, I don't have a car. I used the money to fix my car for the abortion. This is not happening. They tried to give me like the shot afterward. I was like, I'm not taking the shot. Like I became like a very difficult patient. But afterward, I actually felt so many things, and one of them was like, I wanted to talk about the fact that I'd been pregnant. Not even like the abortion notwithstanding. I just wanted to talk about, oh my God, like that was, I can't believe it. I got pregnant. Um, that was something I always wanted to do. And now that the crisis is over, like I can kind of appreciate that I was pregnant. And um, and I spent the next, I looked for a support group where people, or not even a support group, I just wanted like women who were getting together and like talking about this. And I also felt like I wanted to, there were just, I was always trying to become a better person, but I didn't know how to become the person I wanted to be. And not to say that abortion, like that wasn't within the realm of like, it was no longer, after it was over, it was no longer in the realm of I'm a bad person because of that. It just didn't feel like that to me, at least on the surface. And I just was like, I just felt almost like alive. I felt alive afterward. And I couldn't find, I would talk about it with people, but there was kind of like, this sense that it was like a shocking bit of information. And I wish that, and part of me probably, I love to tell stories. So, and when you tell a story and somebody responds in a really like, oh my God kind of way, it's like, yeah, I'm telling a good one then. But I think I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to meet people who'd been through it. And so that was why I kept telling my story. I was like, and so that anybody who had, even if this was like my thinking, if somebody thinks I'm crazy for telling them I've had an abortion, that's okay, because 5 years from now or 6 months from now, that same person might be in my situation and remember and then want to call me. So it's okay to have them think I'm crazy, even if one day it serves. And that was like kind of, it brought out this other side of me that I liked about myself, which was that it wasn't, telling my story wasn't really about me. I mean, except for insofar as I wanted to connect with people, but there was also this element that was about giving other people a way to connect, even retrospectively after they get themselves in that situation. And even if they had to judge me, that was okay. I wanted to, I just talked about it with everybody. I didn't tell my grandparents or many of my family members, but I would tell pretty much anybody else. I wasn't embarrassed or ashamed of it. If anything, I was like, yeah, I didn't have that. And I remember I looked for a memoir in the library when I was pregnant, and that didn't exist. And that was another source of like, how has nobody even written a memoir about this? If 1 in 3 people go through this, how the hell has nobody written? And I thought that nobody wanted to or something. So I was like, I'm going to do it. And I, over the years I traveled, and I didn't feel, I felt a lot of things about it, but I realized that there were only certain things people were able to hear me say about it, about my abortion, or even to process or understand. Even now, as I've been doing interviews about my book, I can hear the journalist over the phone stop typing when I say something new. So if I say something that's like already in the public conversation about abortion, they will, I can hear them typing. And the minute I say something that's like different, it's silence. And I don't know if that's because they're listening, or if it's because it's just like, they're like, oh, that's not usable or something like that. But that's been frustrating, because that was part of my loneliness, was like not being able to say everything. I had to keep it like really sad before the abortion, and then really happy after the abortion, and not be, and it also couldn't be happy in a way of like, so I was like honoring the pregnancy. Like I didn't feel like that was making sense to people. I was like, well, if you honored the pregnancy, wouldn't you have continued it? Like that kind of logic. And like, it couldn't be that I might have been honoring the pregnancy by not continuing it. But it was, that in certain ways that was true. And when I was a couple years later, so like 3 years later, that was enough time for me to, I got sober in that time, and I had met a lot of people who'd had abortions. Our conversations about it tended, by 3 years in, our conversations about abortion were almost solely political. Right after my abortion, I met somebody who had one. It was amazing. It was like a week afterward. It was such a gift. I was like, she was somebody who was my age. It was really important for me to find somebody who was my age, and I was 19 or around, like in college. And I was in the costume shop where I was like at my university working, and this girl I told, I like was bringing up some kind of Supreme Court political piece in order to talk about my abortion. So I'd use politics as a way in. I'm like, let's talk about this because I had an abortion, you know what I mean? So I told her I'd had an abortion, and she was like, my heart goes out to you because I've had an abortion too. And I was like, oh my God. And we hugged, and we just like had like a really tight connection. It was like an instant connection with anybody who'd had an abortion. Another friend of mine went through an abortion. Like, she asked me basically what happened, how I went through it 3 weeks after mine. And I kind of just told her what my experience was like. And then, but then what happened after that was, like, as time went on, the political elements of my story became more prominent because I was affected by the politics. Like, I was really frustrated by the story being told about people who've experienced abortion. I was frustrated that the pro-life or anti-choice, or however people want to say it, people kept, how they were talking about abortion just made me mad because it wasn't true to my experience, or it was just, even if it was true to my experience, it was taking something. It felt like they were making assumptions. They weren't asking me, like, I didn't see, I wanted to be able to tell my own story. And I shaped my story against theirs as a way to combat their story. But that wasn't actually being true to myself. That was telling a story against a story. It was using story as like a weapon. And I became so married to that identity as this like pro-choice, like hardcore, like, I'll tell you about my abortion. Like, it was like, yeah, I mean, my story, it was like a weapon or like some kind of like shield even. It was both, like you can't touch me because I've had this experience, but it was still, there was no vulnerability in it anymore. Not a lot of complexity or truth. It was just like, I had an abortion, don't regret it. I feel good. People don't get it. People don't understand why people have abortion, like that kind of thing. But I found out actually they do understand. They do know why people, a lot of times they do know why people have had an abortion, but something's not speaking to them. And I think that people hear people from the level at which they speak. And if I've stopped speaking from the heart, then it's hard to hear me. And what happened 3 years later is that I had a 9-to-5 job, had a lot of time where I had my mind needed to be focused on my work. I had become an editor. But when you have like 8 hours to just sit there with yourself and edit books about fraud, which is what I was doing, things can come up. There's that space for anything that you've avoided feeling or thinking about or talking about to come up. And the political climate was getting like kind of like, it was getting really intense. It wasn't just like people having their signs out. It was like, now I was in Austin and a guy puts a bomb on a doorstep 3 or 5 miles away from where I'm working and from my home, on a doorstep of a women's clinic. And the SWAT team's out there, and there's like chaos around. This guy is trying to kill people. I mean, he's actually trying to kill people who are like patients, and and so that hit me in this this really, I was like, oh my God, like I will always be a person who's had an abortion. And I felt for some reason that made me forever a target for violence like that, or for being like being the subject of like profound like hatred, anger, and violence, and the idea of spending the rest of my life with this experience in it. And that made it even more, it felt to me that because that guy was representing the same movement that was saying that I was structuring my story against, that I could never tell my full story. Like it felt I was trapped in this story that I had created for myself. And then literally, and the bomb on the women's doorstep happened like a couple days before the third anniversary of my abortion. And then on the third anniversary, my ex emailed me and said he was having a baby with somebody else and naming the baby the same name that I had considered, which was Jade. And I was like short circuiting. Like I didn't even know. I was like, part of me was like this political, like my body, my choice. Then I was like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I had these like, I felt like I had like my identity was like cracking. And I didn't know who to talk to, who would be able to hear me. I didn't want people to think I was on the same side as the guy who tried to bomb a clinic, because I've been there, I've had an abortion. I don't ever want, it wasn't about like an opinion about abortion. I was just having this experience and I felt so trapped in my story. And I wanted to find some way out of feeling trapped without actually having to tell the full story. And so I went to therapy. My therapist was a man, and he kept telling me that the body remembers. The body remembers, Kassi, my abortion, and it wasn't working. I started having like intrusive thoughts. I started having having to pull over on the side of the road and put my head between my legs to breathe. I fainted from panic attacks. And it was like what I learned on my journey. Well, maybe I should kind of get to. There was a lot of stuff there were a lot of like symptoms that could have easily been diagnosed as something, and I had been given medication and then go on like that. But there was actually a lot of stuff covering up grief. And if somebody had told me I needed to grieve, I would have said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Grief sounds like that would have made my skin crawl. It literally would have made my skin crawl if somebody said grief, I needed to grieve, or anything about guilt, like all that stuff, because it sounded like rhetoric to me. Like actual emotional processing sounded like rhetoric. And so I decided I applied to graduate school. I made this list of things I could do to stop feeling depressed. And I thought, am I going to have to go to a psych ward and get locked up because I can't function? My brain won't stop like thinking. These intrusive thoughts are so intense. And they were intrusive thoughts about the abortion. They were also about other things too. It was just like I felt like I was going mad. And I couldn't tell anybody because then they would lock me up in a psych ward, even though I wanted to be locked in a psych ward. It was like nothing made sense. And I applied to graduate school. It was like one of the things I listed of like things I could do. I'm like, just leave the city, leave the city you're in, and you'll be somebody different. Got into grad school in New York City, and I moved. I planned on writing humor essays because I used a lot of humor to avoid going deeper into this experience, into any experience, but this was one of them. And I got up there in second semester. I was having dreams about babies, and I decided to take this Buddhism course to become enlightened. You know, it was a course in the religion department. It was called Tibetan Buddhist auto/biography. Because the ideas that our stories are collective, um, and the professor asked me what I was writing about in my MFA program, and I said abortion. And I think I was always writing about it in my head, even after I wrote my undergraduate thesis about it. And I continued to like write in my journal, and then, and she said, "Oh, have you heard of Mizuko Kuyo? It's this Buddhist ritual for after abortion." And I was like, "No, what the hell is that? I got to do that right now." Because it was like the thing that I always wanted. It was kind of like when I looked for the support group after my abortion and I couldn't find one. I wanted anything to acknowledge that this happened. I mean, it was just such an intense thing for me, and to have nothing afterward it just felt wrong. I mean, it literally felt wrong to my soul, and I don't use the word soul lightly. And I decided, like in that moment, that I was going to do every ritual that existed. When I was standing in the classroom with my professor, I wasn't actually the classroom; it was her office. And I didn't even know they existed. I just like was so sure that they did. I would like insisted that they exist. That all these rituals and ceremonies, anything. And I was like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it in a way, like if I'm going to heal, I'm going to heal. I'm not going to like try this, and then if it doesn't work, try something else. I didn't have the capacity to be in pain and wait anymore. I just had to go for it, and I had to go for it in the biggest, most dramatic way possible. And so I mapped out a journey for myself. And I found out, I went into all these different settings, the Buddhist ritual. I went to a Roman Catholic retreat for after abortion. Did a Jewish celebration. I talked to a woman who she's a therapist, and she's closely aligned with Buddhism, and she had worked at Planned Parenthood for years and years, and now had a private practice. And she, what was so fascinating about her story, she ended up teaching me about grief. And what was so fascinating about her story was that she had published a book called Peace After Abortion. Her name is Avatore Bueno. She published a book called Peace After Abortion in the 90s, and she'd really received a lot of flack from the pro-choice movement about this. They really did not want to entertain the idea that there was any feeling that someone would have after abortion. And she had been listening to stories. She had been counseling people. She's like, you're saying these people don't exist. But she just went for it, and she published it, and it sold out. The first printing was completely sold out. She did sell 1,000 copies, and then she published it again. In which I just thought she's amazing. She's just an amazing person, because she went for it, even though her entire community, she even was like, I think the leader of her NARAL chapter in San Diego, and still that wasn't enough credibility. Like, how was that not enough? I don't know how that wasn't enough credibility for people to listen to what she was saying about the people that she was meeting and listening to and guiding. And but what she taught me, I learned something every single place that I went on this journey that wasn't just about healing from my abortion. It was about that, but it was also about like a tool for life, like something I still use that's made me just like more the person that I want to be. So, when I always longed to be, even when I was 11 years old, I'd write in my journal, like, I want to be the best person I could be. I feel like my abortion gave me the impetus to set out on this journey and to find out what that might look like. And am I the best person I can be? No. I feel like I am for today, and then I'm just going to keep doing this work, whatever it takes. But she taught me how to grieve, and this culture she taught me also like why it was so confusing, and why I felt so nervous when she said, the word grief made me nervous. I was like, but then I'll have to say, well, then is it a baby? And like, I don't want to believe it was a baby, even though like sometimes it was a baby and sometimes it was an embryo, sometimes it was a ball of cells. Like I couldn't even decide on what I wanted to call it because it all felt so politicized, and it all felt like I was committing to something. Like as soon as I used any language, it was like, oh God, I've just committed to something. Or I'm like being disrespectful of this being, or I'm being disrespectful to a movement that's trying to help people. It's just it was so that my thinking around this was so convoluted because I was so afraid, and because of the context that in which I experienced abortion, and so she just taught me about this culture that we live in and how it's grief negative. Like we don't talk about grief. People are uncomfortable with it. It was still really scary for me to grieve. Even then, I was like so uptight. Like my whole body was uptight when I met her. Like I was 25 years old, and every part of me was just like, I was like stiff on her couch. Like I couldn't even allow myself to breathe. But the fact that she had this complex, the fact that she had this complex experience, and her mother had had an abortion before it was legal. She writes about this in her book, and the fact that she just seemed to understand she could hold both. Like I can honor this as a life, and I can grieve, and that there's nothing to be ashamed of with grief. Grief is. She said that she was like, grief is an incredible gift, but you have to experience it one time all the way through to know that. I think that's the line that she said to me. And I had never really grieved all the way through. I had been, we live in a culture where we're told to finish grieving in a certain time period, where we're told that grief, looks a certain way. Grief doesn't look any certain way to anybody. It looks like whatever it looks like that day. And most importantly, she gave me this, like, okay, you should grieve for a certain time, like for a certain number of seconds a day, 30 seconds a day. And that was just so helpful to me. It's really helped me with my whole life. Everything I learned has helped me. But that one stands out the most because that's like the core, for me, that was the core of it all, was learning, that was a real core piece. A lot of other emotions and experiences were covering up grief, even stuff that would easily be diagnosed, and like, where they'd want to diagnose me with something, or things that I could find social validation for, and in the feminist movement, with anybody with, in like a spiritual community, they would validate that. It was actually cover up for grief. And until I get there, I'm still just covering up what I'm ultimately going to have to do. And now I really think of grieving the loss of this pregnancy, and also the loss of those connections that I really wanted. Like I really wanted connections with people, and I didn't have them. And grieving that I'll never get to have. I spent my whole life imagining this first pregnancy, and it was a fucking disaster. It was like a disaster first pregnancy. I messed up a relationship with somebody that I loved. The guy that I got pregnant with, I adored him. He's actually, I just adored him, and he's now in prison, and he's in jail for a long time, actually, strangely, not far from where we're sitting right now in Massachusetts. And he's, his daughter is being raised by his parents. And I heard from his dad recently. And so I might go meet his daughter, which people hear that and they're like, whoa, that's so weird. And I'm like, why? Why is it weird? Like, I think it's so cool that somebody exists that might not have existed if we hadn't had the abortion. And I was even afraid. I was been afraid to go meet her but part of what I learned on this journey, and none of that part's in the book or anything, that's like just happened when they started hearing about the book. What I learned was how like it's okay to show people my emotions. It's okay to cry in front of people. It's okay to like break down in front of people. We can handle this. We can handle other people's emotions, and we can handle our own emotions. What handling it looks like doesn't mean keeping it together. It means releasing them, and they're not going to last forever. It's just that usually I was so used to like piecemealing them, like only one emotion for like 5 seconds, that when I really allow myself to feel them all the way through, it doesn't last for that long, and I can receive like the gift of the grief sooner, and have so many connections with people. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your listening for so long. I didn't know how that was going to come out of me.
Thank you. When you shared your story, you talked about going on this journey of enlightenment and taking part in abortion rituals, or rituals that you didn't even know existed, but that were really important to your journey. Can you talk a little bit about those rituals?
Sure. The first one, as I mentioned, was this Buddhist ritual called Mizuko Kuyo. And Mizuko means water baby, and Kuyo means respect. And that ritual it's amazing for a million reasons. But I think the way I'm going to have to share about this is just like what feels true right now. Because I could say so many different things, and they're all in the book. But I think right now what feels really meaningful about that ritual was that women created it originally. In the 1700s, Japanese women created this ritual. And the idea of stepping into like a historical context of women in community, acknowledging their abortions in public, actually, they would do a public ritual of standing on the roadside and scrubbing and washing these statues of the Bodhisattva Jizo, who is said to guide like children, babies who weren't born, dead children through, and stillbirth, stillborn children, miscarried children. I'm using the word children really liberally right now. I know for some people they would be like, that's not a child, whatever. I think it's fine for me, I like to use that word. But if somebody else doesn't like to use it, just want to put out there that it's okay. And around them, I would use what made them comfortable. And I said that Jizo guides them through the underworld. And they're kind of, I imagine them in this kind of parade. But what was just so cool about that for me, about that ritual, is really that women use the religion for their own, even though they had, this wasn't something that previously existed. It wasn't part of the regular rituals every day, but it was meaningful to them, and it was what they needed, and so they created it, and that they got together in community. And so after my abortion, I really felt connected to history right afterward. I felt like, oh my gosh, like this is a historical experience that women have gone through forever. And I didn't actually know this for a fact until I looked that up later and found out that, yeah, it's been going on since 2500 BC at least on record. And so I just love that ability to step into history. And then I loved, the Catholic retreat was really hard for me, like I said. But at one point they had us name the baby, the embryo, the life, the whatever somebody wants to call it. And it was so hard for me to do that because of the context in which, I felt like they needed me to do this because it was their belief. But I felt in a lot of ways that I was being trapped into this, like, oh, you're coming here to heal, but we're going to have you name the baby, but then we're going to also say that there was like a murder. And so it felt like this like healing trap. But at the same time, I got to see how I was choosing, like, there's no like recourse for what there's nothing that they would have been able to do to me. I was choosing to dig my heels in and be mad and to focus on my suspicion over healing, over the possibility of healing. That is insane. That's insane for me to do that. Because I don't have to focus on that. I can choose to focus on what is healing for me. So it was so painful to do this, but they did such a good job during the weekend of bringing me into their world and their belief system that I really felt deeply what they believed. I felt, oh my God, like they are really seeing this as like a whole life that didn't get to be lived, like a whole world that's no longer going to exist. And even though that doesn't like, yes, that is true. That's actually, for me, feels accurate. I mean, as if the baby had been born, a lot of things happen before a child can be born. So we'll never truly know. But it was powerful for me to allow myself to go, even as I resisted it, I was still like going into their belief system deeper and deeper, to the point where I had to like kind of shake my head and be like, wait a minute, what's real? What's true? Because I came in with these certain beliefs, and if I open myself to something, I'm very susceptible to believing it. And I really got the deep pain and I went really deep into like so much pain there. And so it helped me get to compassion for them, even though I was still angry. I was holding like all these different emotions. Like on the one hand, I'm like, damn it, now I understand why they're so mad. And then on the other hand, I'm like, just like straight up mad at them. But it was so painful to go through that naming process. But also useful. I think that sometimes like directly facing the reality of something that has happened is really something that we're not predisposed to do on our own. And I never would have gone through this, and I never would have felt that intense way, if I hadn't been at this Catholic retreat. So I'm grateful for the depths of pain and the kind of, they actually get, the Catholics get this bad rap for being out of touch with reality, but I think in some ways it was deeply in touch with the reality of what was of loss. And it was helpful, even though it was like literally the most painful experience of my life was probably going to that retreat. Way worse than actually having the abortion. So that was an intense loneliness, but this was like psychic pain. But facing pain is a valuable thing. It's really valuable, because then it can be processed, completely processed. And learning how to grieve. The next thing I did was I learned how to grieve with Avatore Bueno, and the context that she provided, the tools that she gave me, the deeper understanding of like why I felt the way I felt, and like why I didn't get, why I postponed grief, why I hadn't grieved this all the way through, or a lot of other experiences I'd had in my life, was so useful to me, and continues to be. And that chapter, I mean, I think I'll probably go back and read that chapter for tips, because it's easy to forget because it's so against the grain of culture. So much of what I was doing around healing was completely countercultural. And I think deep healing tends to be countercultural. But it's so valuable. Like, I'm free today because I did these things. And then I learned, so it was so cool. Everything built on the last. So then the next, I learned how to, like, what the actual, like, mechanics of grief are. And it wasn't what I thought it was at all. Like I thought it was this kind of like, I just thought it was something completely different. And there's so much power and strength in grieving. It's not this like wimpy thing. And I just have so much more respect for grief. And then I learned in the next place I talked to a somatic therapist, and she taught me how to breathe properly. And that is actually a really big part of allowing emotions in. A lot of people, had been walking around for at least, at that point, 25 years, but I think at some point in my youth, I knew how to breathe. And then we learned how to breathe differently. So she taught me how to breathe. And that's been really useful. It's so helpful to actually know how to use your breath. And it helps with the voice. It helps to have breath support. I went and talked to, there were so many parts that weren't part of the formal elements of my journey that were still really, really crucial to it, like telling my story, like meeting Aspen Baker ex Hale, who just gave me the possibility of, she had created a context for not being in either, not trying to pick a side and in the abortion war and fitting my story in there. She had created this context where I could land. And at a time when I felt like everybody would think I was an idiot if I told the truth about my experience. So she just made it possible for me to imagine a world in which what I was going through was normal and okay, and that there were a lot of other people going through it too. And even that, like, not to make the abortion war wrong, but just to say like this isn't in touch with what we're going through, what we've actually experienced. And a really fun thing was going to this. It's so weird to be like, I had so much fun at my abortion ritual, but I really did. I had a ball at the Jewish ritual. It was like a celebration. It was wild and weird. And it, like, I just felt so high energy when I was there. It was like rabbis were there and Hebrew priestesses were there, and they just kind of gathered around me and created this space where it really, there's a little bit of storytelling, but it was a lot of like there were a lot of actions that I could take. They were like standing around me and taking it. It was all focused on, this was going to sound weird, but it was just like very specific to my experience. So it was very focused on my experience. And so it felt, and I was like, God, this is what I really needed this. Like I needed actually for a ritual that was centered on a very specific experience that was mine. And I wish everybody could have a ritual that's centered on their very specific experiences, like saying the names from their stories, saying facts from their lives, and letting certain things go and bringing certain things with them, and just like honoring the full spectrum of their lives, their experiences, and integrating all these. I create dualities. I think many of us create dualities. We live in a definitely, this country is a lot of the ways that we think and live are based on dualities. So they had made this ritual where I could collapse those dualities. I didn't have to live in this world of right or wrong anymore. That I could just be a human being. And it was just fun. It was funny. They were hilarious. I'm still in touch with them. My rabbi, she wrote me an email the other day and she signed it, "Your rabbi." I'm just a Kentucky girl, raised Episcopalian, which is a form of Christianity. And I just love that I have a rabbi now. And those were like the main of the rituals. And they just really, really set me free. They allowed me to go back and have conversations with people that I was not able to have before. They allowed me to create a different life for myself. I mean, I literally have a different existence than I did. Not just, well, yes, like I just feel different. I was like, I used to like my whole body was just like completely like I was like small and like uptight, and I felt like I was like made of like glass or something like that. But also like it was like steel and glass. Like there were so many mixed messages that I was sending the world. Like I'm fragile, I'm tough, like all these different, because I didn't even know how I felt. Like I was like, am I tough or am I really fragile? Like what's wrong with me? What am I? Like, am I ever gonna feel okay? Maybe it's this next thing that will make me okay. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like now everything's just fine. Everything's okay. I had an abortion. It's not like that sad to me anymore. I'm really just grateful for that experience. And I think that the universe, God, higher power, whatever somebody would want to call it, has been so there like the whole time. And I, that's another like false dichotomy that God is not connected to an abortion experience. I mean, I think that God was there the whole time, like on the examining table, like this whole way, the whole journey, still right here on the couch. And, I just know that. It's not even something I think, it's something I like started to experience along the ride. And I really hope that for anybody who's in pain or who just knows that there's something more to be expressed from their experience. It doesn't have to emerge from great pain. It can just emerge from desire, curiosity, or just like a gut feeling.
You also went on a speaking tour, this Pro Voice tour, sharing your story around the country. What part did that play, not just in your journey of enlightenment, but what part did that play on the way that you have now experienced your abortion?
That's a good question. I think like when I was really, when I was 19, I really, really needed to meet other people who'd been through this like so badly. Just like needed it. And I really wanted us all to be in the same room and all talking about abortion. Like I wanted us to just be talking about abortion together, maybe having a little bit of food, hanging out. Like I needed that. I didn't want to be in the same room all having had this and not talking about it, or talking about it in a political context. I wanted to be like unpacking this experience and being really honest about it. Because when my abortion first happened, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be honest. I didn't know that like basically that the way that it's set up, the system is set up, and therefore how so much of culture is set up is that we're not supposed to be honest about this experience. And that is a killer for me. Like when I'm being dishonest, I am in danger. I mean, I'm also, I'm sober and I don't have the luxury to pretend. And I also just like, I'm a sensitive person. I can't, it doesn't work for me. And so going on this tour, I remember when I first got to meet all the other women, I was like, oh my God, like you're real. And we were it was all these people who needed that in the same way that I did, sitting in the same room, talking about our abortions, eating some chips, like just hanging out. And it was like heaven for me. And it helped me. It was like a gift I was giving my 19-year-old self. And then the possibility then of going and sharing, just meeting those other women who were going on the tour with me was everything. And then the opportunity to go out and meet people and bring this to other people was amazing. And I found, we met people from all like the whole spectrum of political beliefs and religious beliefs, and we weren't trying to convince anyone to change their minds about abortion. We met a lot of people who were anti-abortion, and then they listened to our stories and they said things like, now I realize abortion's a human experience. And so it was just, to have, again, like, to see people being interested in our experiences, like, that's actually really amazing that they were interested. They didn't have to come. They didn't have to listen to us. What are they going to get out of that except potentially just like, an expanded view of reality and experience of love? That's pretty big. That's a lot. What are they going to get except more love? But yeah, I just thought it was incredible because a lot of people I don't think that a lot of people think, I know how I'm going to have a good day today. I'm going to go listen to these people who've had an experience that I've never had, something that I might even judge, and talk to me about it. I don't know, I don't know if I would go and listen. Now I would, but there's been I spent much of my life. I don't think there would be a time when I would go listen to somebody who protests outside of clinics telling their story about that, And so it's amazing the people who do protest outside of clinics came and listened to ours. And what I was really longing for, and that didn't happen as much on the tour, was still to meet more people, and not just to meet them, but to just like, for anybody who felt the way that I had felt, or anybody who was feeling alone, or anyone who just wanted to connect and with more people, to tell them that we're here and that we see them and that we love them and we've been there, and then it's okay to experience and feel whatever they're feeling. It's okay to think whatever they're thinking. They don't have to suppress any aspect of this experience. So we just didn't meet a ton of people who experienced abortion, but we did meet some. And so that was just amazing. And then when the tour ended, I still, I think that part of, the book this was like my little flame signal that I was sending out to say, like, hey, if you're out there, come find me and we'll all find each other, and we're going to have these communities.
Mm-hmm. I wondered if you could also talk about how being in recovery
mm-hmm.
and the 12 steps, how that has shifted the relationship that you've had with your abortion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the 12 steps so much. They've just been so instrumental in my life. I cannot overstate their significance and importance in shaping me as a person and making me like less of an insane person and more I didn't even understand what selfishness meant. I had it mixed up. There are so many words and phrases that have been, I think, muddled over the years, and that program really has helped me get clear on that, because being selfless is being free. And am I selfless every day? No, I spend most of the day in manifestations of self, but it gives me this possibility that of transformation. And what it did for me, particularly with my abortion, was the first time I went through the 12 steps was like 9 months after my abortion. And I got to this point in doing the work where I didn't really feel like there was a fit for it on my the step that I was on. I was like, I just don't, which was supposed to be like the big step or whatever. I was like, I don't really see this as fitting in here. And then I moved around, and this experience just kind of lurked around me. And I was still fascinated with it and thinking about it and writing about it and stuff like that. This is from age like 20 to 22. And I became really depressed. And part of that depression was also, I was sliding away from doing the 12-step work. And this isn't in the book, I don't think. Is it? I don't think it is. So, yeah. And so it helped me. I started working with someone who could guide me through this and that in a new way. And what that really helped me do was to reach a new level of stability in my feeling safe in the world. Even though I was still having anxiety, I wasn't telling myself a story about what it meant to be having a panic attack now. I wasn't going to go tell myself a story about what it meant to be depressed. Or if I had the thought, like I used to have the thought I'm depressed, and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm depressed. Like, what am I going to do? I'm depressed again. Like trying to be undepressed as fast as possible. And I didn't, like, I learned to just like chill out. Like, it's okay. It's just a thought. And that gave me just going through the steps and the way that this woman taught me how to do it was so powerful, because it gave me a little bit looser of a grip on the world. And it also got me really into meditation, because the 11th step talks about meditation and prayer. And so I started meditating in my interest in that, and in a guy who was into meditating at the time, who was going to these Buddhist places. I was like, yeah, I'm really into that too, right? Like, let me go read up on that. Let me order like 5 books from Amazon. This thing was lurking. So all these experiences were able to kind of come together to the point that when I got to New York City and took the class on Buddhism at Columbia, that which was definitely like inspired by my boyfriend, as much as by my abortion and need to feel better. Like, I think that I would have chosen perhaps some other path had I not met that guy, who's in the book, Greg. And had I not, it all had to come together. Like, all these elements that seem so disconnected, they all like kind of lifted me up and placed me directly in that classroom with this professor who could say, have you heard of Mizuko Kuyo? And that helped me get on the path. And I mean, throughout the whole journey, I was doing this other work, because the 12 steps helped me examine fear and any resentment or grudges that I'm holding. So, and sex. But mainly on this particular part of the journey, the focus was like, I was so scared the whole time. I was so scared. So I kept having to do so much work on, like, and this isn't even in the book. I mean, I would have like pages and pages of this. But the level of fear that I felt the entire time of confronting this, the level of fear that I felt about what would these people think of me? Would these pro-choice people, did they think I was an idiot? Did they think I didn't get it? Did they think I didn't know what I was, like, the message that I was playing into? What were these pro-life people going to do to me? What were they going to think of me? Were they going to judge me? Was I not going to be able to get over even going to this retreat? Was I going to go and become something that I couldn't unbecome, something I didn't like, if I do this healing work? And in the 12 steps, like, I just did the work, called my sponsor, did the work, and kept showing up even though I was scared, and kept showing up at the next place even though I was scared. The work doesn't like release the fear, but it allows me to add faith. And faith comes after I do something that scares me. So it just gave me, the courage to show up and say, like, I don't have to fix this. I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to go be there, and I'm going to try to be there, even though I'm uncomfortable, and trust myself and trust a God of my understanding to guide me through this. And truly, truly, that is exactly what happened. I mean, there were some really bad moments, but yeah.
I have another question.
Okay.
About what's in the book.
Okay.
So there was one very particular sentence in the book that really resonated with me the most. I mean, the book really resonated with me, but this particular sentence really brought up a lot of emotion. And as I was saying to you earlier, I was sitting at a restaurant and I was crying. Mm-hmm. And then the waitress came over and I was like, I'm trying to be in my feelings right now, lady. And I had to stop and talk to her, but then I went back to it, and it was just so, like, for me, it was like the most emotional that I got when reading the book. And it's on page 125 when your Buddhist
He called himself a priest. So he used, they called it the Buddhist church. So, yeah.
So the Buddhist priest says, the Mizuko is your guide on the path to enlightenment. And it really resonated with me, and I connected with it because I have felt over the past few years that my abortion has been really a huge part of my life, and it is my guide on my path to X, Y, and Z and everything else. And I can see it for other people if they become very aware of it. And I also hear it from people who share their story, right? So I wondered, how did that one sentence, like when he said that to you, did it shift how you felt about your abortion experience?
That's such a great question. I think that part of me already knew that. Mm-hmm. So it was like confirmation. Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, I do remember feeling like relieved because I was like, oh, I'm not crazy. Because this isn't, it's like, where is that in the public narrative? Your Mizuko will be your guide on the path to enlightenment. Like, imagine if we leave a clinic, it's like, your abortion. This whatever somebody wants to call it, like this spirit, for me, this Mizuko is a water baby. Mm-hmm. So this spirit of this, that came to you will be your guide from now on. I mean, I'm sure some people would be like, shut up. I mean, for me, it's like so beautiful. It's so true. It feels so true. And I think I always try to explain this thing that has occurred for me that I don't know if people have understood it when I've tried to explain it, but that it's like, it's not only has it become my guide in some like out there kind of way, but it's been like incorporated into my into me, so that it's like an internal experience now, and that guidance is so strong. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just feel like that, and it has become an element of of strength. I mean, it really is like, it feels almost like a superpower or something like that, or like a supernatural guide. And I just fully believe it, that because I've experienced it, that if we follow this path afterward, it will lead us where we want to go. It helped me get sober faster. I knew I needed to get sober, but there was no way that I was going to be getting sober unless I really hit bottom as fast as I did. Afterward, I'd already had a problem drinking beforehand, and then all the learning, then I get to go and do the 12 steps, which is definitely emerged from this, like my willingness to do that. It all became possible after this, even when I went through the most painful depression of my life. It was still, even then, when I thought it would never get better, and when I thought I literally thought I would never feel normal again. When I was 22 years old, I thought, I'm going to have to go somewhere, and just like be taken care of or something, because I am just faking it right now in life. Even in that moment, I look back on that part of it and think, God, thank God for that, because that's when I got really serious about doing this work, and where that it really has been my guide.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, and for putting that in there. And thank you to the Buddhist priests.
Yes, exactly. Reverend TK.
Reverend TK, yeah. Why do you want to share your story?
I just want people to know that it's possible. I mean, I just feel so grateful. It's possible to heal. And when I say heal almost sounds like you're just getting kind of like almost back to where you used to be. But what I mean is that after this experience, you can reach a place that you've never been before. And I want people to know that's possible. I've been really blessed I've just had a really lucky life. Like, my life has been so blessed. And even though there are things where people would, pieces of my history and my life where people would be like, oh, that sucks, like, that's horrible, I actually think it's been so blessed. And I've been particularly blessed to have good teachers. I just have the best teachers. Like, I end up with these incredible people who tell me exactly, I'm like, oh my God, like, that's exactly what I needed to know right now, throughout my life. And I don't know if everybody experiences teachers like that. But if they haven't, I'm like, well, here's a book about the good teachers that I've had, and I hope you enjoy it. Because I just feel like everyone should have the information and not have to feel alone, and know that whatever they're going through, even if they're going through what is like depression, wasn't even the word for what I was experiencing 3 years after my abortion. It was like full blown, like, I thought my brain was cracking up, like, and even from that you can heal, and you can heal with other people, and that there's a path, there's a way, and it might not be the way that I went on this journey, but everyone, if you just, all you have to do is put out the question to the universe. You don't even have to ask anything in particular. You can just say, what can I do? What will it take for me to heal right now? I just ask that question and answers will come.
And you have shared your story in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel to share your story in this way? Really good, because what it feels like is I'm talking to a friend who's experienced. I know that you have had, you have also experienced what I've experienced with abortion, and so I know that you know things that I know, and that I don't have to. I just know that I don't have to censor myself, and I don't have to explain things to you in the way that I have felt like I have to explain to people, and it is so confusing. The political context, it's so counter what people think it's going to be, and so it just feels really, really amazing to be able to just have this conversation, and I know that you get it, and it just, to talk to somebody who gets it without having to, break things down, it just feels really good. It just feels so free. I'm like, oh my God, like, what if the whole world were like this for everybody who's experienced abortion? Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a free space.
Yeah, have a free space, but also have people who understand, like, that it's like that it's okay, that having one experience doesn't mean that you are aligned with some particular, like, that you're playing into a political system, that there's something else you do that I love. I just know that I just know that you get it. I mean, it just feels good. And I hope that other people have that. Oh, and the other thing is, like, we can talk about this, and I know that you're not thinking like, oh, how sad, or something like that. Like, you know what it is? I feel like you're relating to me instead of listening to me like I'm under, like you're not objectifying me. You're, like, listening to me as a friend, as somebody who's relating to me. Yeah, that just feels really good to be related to. Yeah.
This is Melissa, and thanks again for listening. You can continue to listen to our stories online through our website by subscribing on iTunes or SoundCloud or your favorite podcast app. And if you rate and review our podcast on iTunes, it helps new listeners find us by boosting our iTunes ranking. And remember, the Abortion Diary needs your support. Help the Abortion Diary continue its work and share our stories by donating, and consider supporting us with a monthly gift. I'll be back next week with a new story. New stories are posted every Tuesday. Until then, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Listen for us next week.